They will not leave disappointed. This guy is unique, special, and we are privileged to be here today.
For the Sacramento Kings, it feels like what goes up must come down. After failing to capitalize on a 48-34 season 2 years ago, tinkering and ownership meddling led to the recent trades and ultimately decline of the Kings. Mike Brown, who led the Sacramento Kings to said 48-34 record, was fired mid-season, paving the way for Doug Christie to assume the role. De'Aaron Fox, out of tune with his Sacramento future, demanded a trade and got one, shipped off to the San Antonio Spurs. And just days after losing to the Dallas Mavericks in the playoffs, Monty McNair was let go, with Scott Perry assuming the general manager's role. And yet, Sacramento's a team not without talent. Domantas Sabonis returns off an extension, DeMar DeRozan returns, and a key piece in the Fox return, Zach LaVine, looked good in his first stretch of games in the Kings uniform. I think the biggest question here is, can Sacramento properly build around this group, right? We've seen some of the moves they made this offseason. The devil was really in the details when it comes to that. And ultimately, I'm curious to see how they build around their... It's a trio when you consider DeRozan. I don't, so it's a duet of Domantas Sabonis and Zach LaVine. Both of them are really talented. Both of them have flaws. Sabonis, really good passer, high-level rebounder, but defensively kind of lacks. And when you play him at center, you kind of look for the other players around him to be good defensively. LaVine came in and you kind of forget, right? Like Zach LaVine was a good player in Chicago, but injuries and then the team ultimately being stagnant.
Initiation of the offense. Could shoot a three, just light it up. Gives his team a 2-point lead. Great job.
Handle the ball.
LaVine answers.
Load for a team. I just wonder what the pieces are around that group, right? Ultimately, I kind of think the answer is Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray, but they need more. You know, Malik Monk off the bench is a good player. You have guys who can play. I think they had a good draft class, but they need a little bit more from Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray. I think that's the difference between this team finishing 12th and actually sneaking into the play-in. We talked about Ellis before. Fine defender, good defender, active defender. So you kind of want him on the floor. He hit 43% of his threes last year. So it was confusing when they picked up the option, right? You usually want to sign that guy. And I think there was a space where you could have signed him to a pretty good contract and not have to deal with the will he stay, will he go next season, right? As for Keegan Murray, he has to shoot. That's the big thing. He's a talented forward. He can play a little bit of three, play a little bit of four. The big thing for him is, can he space the floor? If he can space the floor, you're now looking at this like 3-and-D jumbo wing. I don't want to say jumbo wing. He's more of just a big forward who can do a lot of things on the floor defensively. I think those are the pieces that you kind of need to sprinkle within a LaVine, Sabonis-led team. Overall, I think Sacramento's base is good. There are a lot of warts here, especially on the defensive end, but I like the young guys they have on the roster who can kind of pick up for the slack. Ultimately, I think the Kings are going to miss the playoffs, but they're still a good team, but missing the playoffs means more tinkering and roster meddling for Sacramento in the near future. Few things more beautiful in basketball than turning the corner, right? In the first half of the season, the Portland Trailblazers were a bit of an afterthought, 11-20, no real identity. They felt like a team that traded away a superstar and had a bloated roster after that, right? And then, second half of the season, a funny thing happened, right? The Blazers turned things around. They started playing.
Anderson off the screen. Gives to Clingan, rolls to the hole and jams it.
Ultimately, I think the Blazers moved themselves into a team where we had to talk about, is this rebuild working? To one of the more interesting teams moving forward over the next calendar, to one of the teams that are more interesting over the next 12 calendar months here. Can the Blazers take the step forward this year and make the playoffs, or is next year more of the year for Portland? Before we talk about the backbone of Portland's team and their structure, I want to talk about one of their biggest concerns for me is that I just don't know where they go late in a game, right? And obviously the answer is going to be find the best player, get him the best shot, create shots that'll work, right? But ultimately you do kind of need a guy who can kind of turn things and make things possible, right? I look at Shaedon Sharpe as the best option here. A quiet 18.5 points per game last season. Didn't play that many games last year, but you kind of see the steps forward in his overall game as a shooter. Obviously one of the more athletic players in the league, so you get a lot of dunks in his profile, but I think he's going to be an interesting player in terms of can he make big shots down the stretch to help Portland win basketball games. And we can't talk about Portland's breakthrough season without talking about their defense. Second half of the year, 4th in the league in defensive efficiency. I think that's huge. I think that's a big thing there. We talked about Tamani Kamara. We talked about Denny Avia. But it's 2 other players that's right there that fixes things for them, right? The first is Drew Holiday. They traded Anthony Simons to Boston for Drew Holiday. I think Holiday took a step back offensively, which could be a concern, right? But defensively, I think he was still at that level. And for the Blazers, a lot of things are going on with the point guard position, right? Scoot Henderson's entering his 3rd season. You kind of hope that he can figure things out, put things together. Damian Lillard, you re-signed him. He's coming back next season off the Achilles. Same thing. You kind of hope that you have a guy that can kind of establish the offense. If Sharp can't do it, Lillard can do it alongside Drew Holiday is the hope, right? But I think Holiday's defense is going to be so crucial playing alongside a Sharp, even alongside a Scoot, that I think that's going to be a catalyst for fixing their perimeter defense. And then you have Donovan Clingan on the back end. I thought he was the best prospect of the draft last year just because he had a high floor. And early in the season, you kind of saw those things come into play, right? Really good defensively, a little bit more mobile than you would think, and effective at the rim. I look at these 4, Drew Holiday, Tamani Kamara, Denny Avia, and Donovan Clingan as the backbone of the Blazers. Overall, I like the Blazers long term. I like their defensive ethos. I like their core defensively. And I think this is opened up for next year to be the year. But this year, I have them finishing 11th in the Western Conference. I don't know how to properly explain San Antonio's 24-25 season, but we're going to try, right? Greg Popovich went down, unfortunately, with a stroke, handing the keys over to Mitch Johnson as the head coach for the season, and that eventually took care of itself as Popovich stepped down. Johnson took over. Victor Wembanyama, all-star, everything the Spurs thought of and more before deep vein thrombosis ended his season. Unfortunate. San Antonio took advantage of Sacramento's misfortune, acquiring De'Aaron Fox for pennies on the dollar. Stephon Castle was the Rookie of the Year. All in all, you really don't know that the Spurs finished 34-48, right? They kind of balanced things out and kind of just navigated the season. Once Wembanyama went down, things changed for him, but ultimately this looked like the last season before the Spurs take the leap, right? I can't help but glance and look at their roster outside of their top 3 guys, which we'll talk about in a moment. The 2025 draft looks like a hit so far. And then you look at the rest of their roster, it's like Harrison Barnes is unk. So he'll play some 4, he'll play some 3, more 4, I think. You add Luke Cornett, who I think is a really good fit alongside Wembanyama. And then you got guys like Keldon Johnson, who's kind of whatever. Jeremy Sochan, got to figure it out on offense. I even put Stephon Castle in this group because I just don't know what his long-term, what it looks like. But I want to start with the conversation between Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox, right? I think the first thing we talk about is Victor Wembanyama is everything you want in a basketball player. I think the first thing we have to admit is Victor Wembanyama can change the math on San Antonio because this is probably the most talented roster he's ever played with. So adding a player of Fox's caliber to Wembanyama, making some shots easier, I want to see, that's the main thing I want to see here is if Fox can make some easier attempts for Wembanyama. But ultimately, I think they make the play-in. And with De'Aaron Fox, I think the conversation that we need to have is him trying to get back to that level, right? If a 4-year, $229 million extension signed this summer, I think a lot of people attack that. I'm more interested to see if the Wemby-Fox synergy helps both players, right? We talked about Wemby and getting easier shot attempts and not having to create too much for himself or create less. You do want Wembanyama to create shots, but I'm also interested to see how Fox plays off of Wemby on the defensive side of the ball, right? I'm curious to see if Fox could jump back to that 2022, 23 defensive level and get back to being that active defender because then that team's going to take a huge step forward, right? Because you have an elite defender on the perimeter. You got really good defenders, an elite all-world alien behind you. Fox is key to doing that. I'm also interested in seeing how the pick and roll works with Fox and Wemby. Should be dangerous, especially when you consider Fox's speed, ability to get downhill pretty quickly, and then Wemby just being 7'4", and able to catch the ball out of the air and dunk it, essentially. It'll be interesting to see if that's a staple of the San Antonio offense or not. I am fascinated. Let me not say that. Consider me intrigued on Devin Vassell as a player to watch this year. The last couple of years, he was the second option. When he broke out, many people thought he was going to become like a top guard in the league, two-way guard, space the floor. Now he's like the third guy in Sacramento, right? It's Wembanyama, Fox, Vassell. I'm interested to see how his game evolves, right? If he can kind of take another step forward. He shot well. He plays good defense. I want to see him take another step forward defensively. He's the most interesting player on this roster to me, because if Vassell takes a step forward and you have Fox playing at his level and Wembanyama playing at his level, I'm excited. I'm excited for this. Ultimately, I think this is a year where the Spurs take whatever they can take, right? They hope for good health, and if you get good health, you then kind of see what this roster is and what the direction is. Victor Wembanyama is a top 7 player in the league, and he could change the math on this. So I'm personally excited to see what happens here with San Antonio. They are my 10th seed, the last team to make the playoffs in the Western Conference.
They will not leave disappointed.